Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for being able to join us on this orientation session. We're really excited that that you're a part of the Guatemala trip this year.
Yes, we're excited to have you here. At the beginning, this is where it all begins.
So again, you are able to either watch this live, as it looks like we already have a viewer here, which is good. Or this is also going to be a YouTube link that will be viewable later.
Yeah.
Cool. So the main thing that we're going to be screen sharing with you is a presentation that will be available as well for you afterwards. So we'll make sure to share that with you so that there's some links in there, and if there's anything that you need to review and that sort of thing, then you're able to do that. So we're going to go ahead and pull up that presentation, and kind of from here on out, with the exception of the very end, that's going to be what you'll see on your screen.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so hopefully you are able to see, yep, there we go, the screen here.
And if any time you have questions during this presentation, all you have to do is email Spanish4Educators and we'll answer them at the end.
And then before we get started, I also wanted to mention, first of all, you should have received your invoice. We're using Square this year as the platform for that. So you're able to just pay the email that you received from Square, courtesy of Spanish4Educators. If you have any questions, please email the info@Spanish4Educators.org email as well. And then a good percentage of you should have already gotten your care package, which includes a Spanish4Educators t-shirt, as well as a water bottle sticker and a book that is by the woman that's over here on the right, the lower right part of the screen, whose name is Rigoberta Menchú, who's also a Nobel Peace Prize winning laureate, who is also an indigenous Guatemalan woman. And so that's something that with the, so far, Lorraine, Julie, Sylvia, Olivia, Kelly, Faye, and Lori, you should have received that. If not, please let me know. And for the remainder of you, I believe we have a majority of you that have filled out that registration part 2 survey, which is great. So for the remainder of you who have filled out that registration part 2 survey, I'll make sure to get that in the mail for you by Tuesday. But if you have not done that registration part 2 survey, then I'm not going to be able to send it out to you until you do that survey, because it asks some things such as, for example, your t-shirt size that we need in order to be able to send you that care package. So make sure that you are doing that registration part 2.
So these are some of the agenda items that we're going to go over during this presentation. We're going to introduce ourselves, Guatemala, this year's cohort, go over some the graduate credits and how they're to be achieved, safety and health, culture shock, a little bit about that, some frequently asked questions. We're going to briefly just highlight the calendar, but not spend too much time with it. You can spend time with it later. The school shadowing that you're all going to be doing, and some reading and viewing recommendations, some movies that you can stream on Netflix and such, as well as any questions that you have that you've written to us through the Spanish4Educators website or email address. So we are really rooted in our mission, and that is basically that not only will you become competent in Spanish if you aren't already, but you're going to increase your fluency, but also culturally competent. So you can take that information and what you learn and become more comfortable with back to your students, your schools, and the Hispanic communities that you operate in. It's a really rich experience, as well as the cohort itself, just being able to operate in that and maybe even make a few lifelong friends. We've had that happen before. So.
And as far as the linguistic piece, that's one reason why the cultural immersion and competence is so huge, is because realistically, with 2 weeks in Guatemala, it's not something where because I know that we have quite a few people this year who are in like the partially proficient to kind of unsatisfactory / no Spanish range. And so keep in mind that 2 weeks is kind of dipping your toes in the water, and you'll definitely make some major strides. But if you have absolutely no prior Spanish knowledge, then it's not like you're necessarily gonna emerge totally proficient and fluent. So
no, but you will make great strides. I've seen it, and it's surprising and amazing.
Yes, totally. Totally. A little bit about Spanish for Educators. So in 1997 was my first trip to Guatemala. So essentially that's kind of when Spanish for Educators was born. And then in 1999, an organization that I've also been involved with named Global Visionaries was established, and I have had the opportunity to travel along with that organization several times to Guatemala. And that organization works primarily with students and not with adults. And so my capacity with that organization was more as kind of an adult leader for a group of high school students. And then there was an organization that I created in 2004 called SpanishMedical.com. And that was, as the name indicates, more for medical professionals and medical students and pre-health students. And then more recently, over the past, like it indicates, 9 years, or I guess that would be 12 years. I've been traveling with Global Visionaries, a couple times with Spanish Medical, and then for the last 4 years, I think it was, with Spanish for Educators. So yeah, I forgot to put that on the bullet points, but so yeah, we had a large group of 23, which was our first group with Spanish for Educators in 2014 from a district in Fort Collins, Colorado. And so every subsequent year since then, so this will be, I believe, our fourth subsequent year since then that we've had a group anywhere from, 8 until about 20 people that have gone to Guatemala with us.
So, and me, I'm Tiffany Higgins. That's the person whose voice you've heard and you saw at the very beginning. This is my third time going to Guatemala with Steve's groups, and I have a pretty strong background in both teaching and facilitating. And you can read it. I have loved this trip, which is why I'm doing it again. And I'm looking forward to not only learning with you all, but adventuring into this newness, and hopefully being able to mediate any issues, problems, or discomforts that may come up or not during our trip.
So I am a Steve Foster, 7th grade social studies teacher in Denver Public Schools, and it's my 8th year of teaching, and like was previously indicated, 4th year, although this year I'm going to be more behind the scenes. I'm not actually going to be traveling along with the cohort. That's going to be Tiffany, as well as another woman by the name of Karen Immerso, who's great. We'll get into her here subsequently. But yeah, so my background is with, first of all, secondary social studies is what I teach and what I'm licensed in. And like I had previously mentioned, as far as the specialized immersion programs, not only on the medical side, but with educators, and then a little bit more about my background with those last two bullets, and my family, as you can see.
And Karen's not able to be with us today. She's probably listening in now. Well, the first thing you need to know is that while it's her first trip with us, with Spanish4Educators, I have known Karen for about 7 years and co-facilitated with her, as well as facilitated similar programs. She comes with a wealth of experience over 35 years, and in both international programs as well as ones that take place in the United States. She's teaching at Western State. She's teaching beginner Spanish. So we are going to have a lot of fun together. And as you can see, just based on her bio, she has got her fingers in so many different pies. She's a very interesting and wonderful person.
And not only that, but she's going to be the contact, which we'll get into in just a sec, as far as the graduate credits. She's going to be the instructor of record, which is great. We have offered graduate credits in the past, but never with somebody who actually is able to go along on the trip and be involved in that way. So super lucky to be able to have Karen. And then the operations person that's going to be helping us out and supporting us in Guatemala is Blanca Soldados. Again, super lucky to have Blanca. She's great. She's amazing. She's got a wealth of experience. And I would encourage you, if you are watching this, whether it's live or recorded, to be able to test your Spanish skills, to be able to go through. I do have it in English in just a sec, but to go through and see if you can make out some of the different Spanish that she has written down as far as kind of her professional history. So feel free to do that now. If not, here is the English side of things. So as you can see, she's not only worked as a host mother for Spanish students coming from countries all around the world, but also as a Spanish teacher, as a Spanish school coordinator, and then also as a group leader. So that bottom bullet point there, you can see that not only with us, but also with a group out of Quebec, Canada, she's done the coordination of volunteer work, Spanish classes, cultural activities, the tourist excursions side of things. So really, really lucky to have Blanca, and I think that when you meet her, you'll agree.
So one thing that you should know about where you're going is Guatemala is known as the heart of the Mayan world. And you'll see it as soon as you get there. It's very different than other Latino countries like Mexico and things like that, in terms of the people tend to be pretty conservative. But also Guatemala City, which we're going to fly into, is built on ruins. And Tikal, if you end up going there, is just known as a Mecca. It was a major commerce area for the Mayan culture and people. So. Yeah,
and unfortunately, as a history teacher, I kind of have a little bit more insight into this, but I'm sure a lot of people may also be aware. So the Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1525 into Guatemala. And so that was a really big kind of influence in a negative way on the Mayan civilization, more than anything, because of the diseases that they brought with them. And so that was a big turning point on the history of Guatemala. And then, as you can see, in 1821, they gained independence from the Spanish. And then another thing that is a pretty big emphasis of conversation, whoever you're talking with, is the Civil War. It was a 36-year conflict from 1960 to 1996.
That was the official conflict dates, but they're actually longer than that.
Yeah, and so that's another thing that we'll continue to kind of discuss, and that the book that you either have received or will receive has a big chunk of. It's basically centered around this conflict and how it influenced the indigenous people, the influence of the United States in that conflict, and the kind of like surrounding the Cold War and different things like that. So, but as you can see, like from 1996 until now, it's been over 20 years. And so while, if you talk to older Guatemalans, especially, but everybody really was influenced. And it's something where you do need to be sensitive as far as the types of conversations that you bring up. And because when it comes down to it, there's a lot of people out there that have lost family members, and so we'll continue to kind of have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like using this image as well. It's from the CIA World Factbook to be able to give you an idea of the size of Guatemala. So Antigua is not actually on here, but it is kind of like below the L of Quetzaltenango. So as you can see, it's fairly close to the capital city of Guatemala City, which is where you'll be flying into. But more than anything with this slide is to just kind of give you an idea of something that you know, where it's transposed onto the United States, and it's slightly smaller than Pennsylvania.
So our cohort, we are from all over the United States, California, Colorado, New York, and Ohio. We range in age from 20s to 60s, which is a wonderful diversity of people with different life experiences and different backgrounds. I don't know if we have any advanced speakers this time, but we've got a lot of really zesty beginners. And in terms of education, we have principals, teachers, and one teacher who's bringing her daughter. Last year, we had people who brought their kids as well, which was wonderful.
I brought my daughter last year, and
seriously.
She had a great time.
And how old is she?
At the time, she was 3. Now she's 4.
And we had a great time with her.
Yes. So again, we'll send you the link to this slideshow, but there's within this slideshow, it is slide number 15 or 14, excuse me. And then there's going to be another slide deck that will have a space for you to be able to put a short bio about yourself, similar to what you saw from Tiffany, myself, and Blanca and Karen. So we've done this for the last couple of years. We try to encourage as cohesive, like Tiffany had mentioned, as cohesive as a group as possible, more than anything for a support, as well as for, like you said, building those lifelong friends. So this is a good starting point in that, since people are coming from all over. And since we won't be together, or you won't be together as a group until you're in Guatemala. So you're welcome to either send the info to that Spanish4Educators email, or I will put everybody as editors on the slideshow, so you can do it yourself if you'd like. And then it is only going to be viewable by participants on the trip, so you don't have to worry about anything as far as privacy goes. So graduate credits, again, it's going to be 3 credits, $375, which for those of you that have recently finished up a master's or have gone through any type of graduate credits in the past, you know that that's a really good deal. Western State Colorado University is going to be the custodian institution of the credits, and they are transferable to anywhere because it is a fully accredited university. As previously mentioned, Karen is going to be the instructor of record, and she is a Spanish instructor at Western. And then, you know, kind of without seeming like to be on too much of a soapbox, it is transferable towards most districts. If you're in a public school, have salary increases that are available with continuing education and that sort of thing, as well as, at least here in Colorado, I think it's like every 6 years that you have to get recertified. And so it makes that whole process a lot more seamless if you have graduate credits, to be able to just give them a copy of your transcript instead of having to document the various other things that we do as educators to be able to maintain our professional development. So highly recommended. There was a question on the registration part 2 survey asking if you were interested in the graduate credits. And even if you put no on that question, we're still going to be taking enrollment all the way through departure, I believe. I'm going to need to check with our colleagues at Western on that one. But I would really highly recommend it. And it's not going to be something that you have to do a ton of extra stuff. There's actually only going to be 2 products that Karen will be collecting. And I'll be supporting her as well with that. And so one is going to be kind of like a journal, like a reflection, where you're going to be keeping like a little bit of a, I don't want to say diary, but something where you'll have a few different entries on there, and you'll be kind of keeping a running record of some of your reflection through the trip. And then the other one is a lesson plan that you can craft, and it's very, very open as far as what that looks like. But it needs to incorporate some element of either the trip or Guatemala or the Mayan civilization or anything that you've gained through this experience. So please let us know if you have questions on that. So as far as safety and health, the goal is that 100% of the group not only has grown linguistically and culturally, not only has just an incredible overall experience, but especially has a lot of fun. Some of the challenges of that, which we're going to get into not only now, but as we go through this whole preparation process, are culture shock. And so we're going to start that conversation today, as well as traveler's diarrhea, especially, and other waterborne illnesses, which sometimes can include bacterial diseases. And so we're going to kind of go through some of those different elements right now as far as how to be as proactive as possible to make it so we can accomplish those goals of your growth and fun and having a great experience. So Guatemala is a developing country. So keep in mind that developmentally, infrastructure, things like that, they don't have necessarily the same sort of infrastructure and just development that we do here in the United States. So,
well, in part, they're also still recovering from their conflict. That's really evident in terms of the water, especially.
Yeah, and so
impacted.
Yeah, speaking of the water, it is the worst water in the Western Hemisphere outside of Haiti. So that's going to be kind of a center point of proactively trying to make sure that everybody stays healthy. And developmentally, just to give you an idea of where Guatemala is, they rank in the same echelon as countries like Nicaragua, Ghana, Morocco, and even Iraq, as far as the UN puts out this Human Development Index every year. Mm-hmm. And so that's directly from that Human Development Index. As far as vaccinations, we have a link to the Center for Disease Control recommendations that you'll be able to go to once you get the slide deck. More than anything, it's you need to stay up to date on your routine vaccinations. So if, as teachers, I think that's for the most part not going to be an issue. And then the ones that they really recommend as you do check in with your doctor and you talk to the travel clinic, like I know, like for those people that may have like Kaiser Permanente, for example, there's like a specific traveler hotline that you call and that you talk to and you make an appointment with to be able to go through this process. So make sure that that's your number one go-to. But hepatitis A and typhoid are the ones that you'll most likely be getting. And then, especially for the people that are going to TCAL, it's also recommended that you get the malaria medication. It's gotten a lot better recently. For those people that have taken it in the past, you may know that there was some pretty major side effects with that. And so, especially in the case where people that are going to TCAL, where it's only a 3-day, 2-night trip, a lot of times in the past it wasn't worth getting that. But they do have it where there's hardly any side effects for the malaria medication, and you actually don't take it, and you start taking it like a few days before you go to TCAL, because that's the only place that you're going to be really exposed to the type of mosquitoes that will carry that malaria medication. Antigua, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's a lot more mild as far as the climate, as far as the bugs and things like that. So, and then hepatitis B and rabies. Rabies is something that, unfortunately, for those people that have done extensive international travel, that there's a lot more stray dogs and cats in other countries as there is in the United States. And so, I had a facilitator on the first big group trip that we did that was like this major dog lover that, as much as I said not to, he would go approach all the stray dogs every single time that he saw one. And so if you're that type of person, especially that, you sometimes don't make the best decisions when it comes to that sort of thing, then yes, I would get the rabies. But other than that, that's something that is, I think that you can just use common sense to not have to waste the pain and the sometimes money to be able to get that shot.
So things to think about in terms of maintaining water safety are that all the families that you're going to be staying with have bottled water. So that's a really easy place to fill up, as well as at the school that we're all going to be studying at in the afternoons. Anytime we go out, there'll be a lot of places in Antigua is very, very accustomed to tourists. So, however, it never hurts to ask restaurants if they use bottled water, if they use how they wash their vegetables or where they got their ice and things like that. But it's to the point where even in the families, when you're taking showers and stuff like that, you'll want to keep your mouth closed and brush with bottled water. So it just becomes a habit. And that's just how careful you have to be in order to maintain good health.
Yeah, I think that, with brushing teeth, I do have some people that have been on the trip before that have, for example, even like rinsing your toothbrush, like we strongly recommend that you use bottled water for that. But it's all in the name of being proactive. And so that's not to say that there's people out there that have rinsed their toothbrush with tap water that haven't gotten sick, but the goal is to be able to do everything possible to prevent that from happening. And so that's why we're saying, like, yes, brush your teeth with bottled water.
Yeah. And like I said, there'll be plenty of it in the families as well as at school. So there's never been a problem in getting it, just so you know. So I have traveled all over the place and lived in many countries, and Antigua is a safe city. They specifically have tourist police that are to ensure that everyone is treated well, maintain safety, that, you wouldn't actually know that it's anything but. And also Guatemala and especially Antigua, they rely on tourism as a way to support themselves. And so the city itself, the governing body of the city itself, is very, very, very vigilant about maintaining tourist safety. However, our motto is that if you're looking for trouble, you're going to find it. So if traveling alone at night or down a dark alley or wearing flashy jewelry or showing off your phone, if you're going to, take walks early in the morning or late at night, are not smart. These are things that actually, if we did here in certain places, would be inappropriate as well. We have had a couple of incidences, one in particular where one of our participants went running at 6 o'clock in the morning and stopped to take a bunch of photos with her iPhone and was asked to give it over by a group of people. And she did. There's those kinds of things that if you are thoughtful about, then there's not any problems.
Common sense goes a long way.
Common sense goes a long way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think there's anything else.
No.
So some of you are probably very familiar with this just based on education, but what we try to do in this program is really stay in the place of comfort zone and risk zone, knowing that you're going to be in a different country, a place that maybe you haven't visited before, studying a language, which can be a little bit stressful, putting yourself out and taking risks. So there's that heightened sense of discomfort that's going to come up. But we'd like you to maintain this level of being in your comfort zone and also being in the risk zone, but not by any stroke of the imagination going to the danger zone. So what's important is maintaining a really good communication with Karen and I about how you're doing, what's going on. And if you feel like you're broaching that area, let us know and we can mediate what's going on, or brainstorm or go out to lunch or do something that might help you rest in the situation, might help bring you back to a place of comfort. So we're there to support you in every possible way to make this trip a lot of fun, a learning experience, and that risks are going to be important to take. Because even me speaking Spanish, I'm a native English speaker speaking Spanish, and I have to challenge myself to really put myself out there. However, we want to stay in the comfort and the risk zone.
And remember, like Tiffany's saying, like the only way that you're going to be able to grow and to learn is by getting into that risk zone. And so please don't stay in the comfort zone the entire time, where, like, you know, Antigua is a place where especially for the people that are in their danger zone, then yes, like if you really wanted to go somewhere that caters to people from the United States, then yes, you could go, you know, to a coffee shop that has a lot of other people from the United States and that sort of thing. But don't, if you're in your comfort zone, then don't do that. You know, that's just if you're like, wow, culturally, I'm in a space right now where I need to just pause. Then yeah, check in with Karen and Tiffany, and that might be something that they kind of recommend. But try to be in that risk zone as much as possible.
So you should remember that Antigua is at high altitude. They're around 5,000 feet, and that can tax you. But also remember for packing that layers, while it's in the rainy season, and while there may be a canicula, which is basically a dry spell in the middle of rain, it's good to pack layers and be prepared for anything. It's the only place I've ever traveled where I actually bring my umbrella and I use it. And it's the weather is actually really nice. Usually there's part of the day that's sunny and beautiful, and then there's part of the day where huge rains will come down, lots of buckets of water, and then it'll stop.
And that's usually in the afternoon when we're at Spanish class anyways. And so that's purposeful to be able to have that when the rains do come to be in Spanish class. But sometimes you may get caught between Spanish class and going back to your host family for dinner, where we did have a few days last year, for example, or I think it was like 1, maybe 2, where people were getting soaked because when it does rain,
it rains.
It rains, and not only that, but because of the infrastructure of being a developing country, the flooding is much more of an issue than in the United States.
But not flooding in a dangerous way, meaning that your feet are going to get wet.
Yeah.
So one thing you should know is that there is a packing list in the shared Google folder that'll be really helpful. I found it to be exactly what I needed, and I bring almost everything on it. So, and also while you're packing, remember that you're going to be visiting the schools a couple times a week. And I feel I'm going to take a risk and say this, that keep in mind the 3 B's: no boobs, no back, and boobs, back, and butt. No boobs, no back, and no butt. So just kind of, it's a very conservative place in the school. One of the schools especially is up in the mountains in an indigenous area. And you'll be treated differently if you're exposed at all.
And that also goes for, you know, it's also a very, not only conservative, but especially because of the Catholic influence.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year we had a woman who went into one of the cathedrals, and it was kind of more of like a tour type thing, but you also need to be cognizant of that. Like if you are going into like a religious setting, or especially when we do like Tiffany said, our Guatemala public school experience, then, you know, you just dressed conservatively, but also like as if you were kind of in your teacher type stuff. You know? But we'll have that packing list on the Google folder that you're going to have access to. So, and then with money, the best piece of advice that we can give on that is to call your bank as far as the fees and to let them know that you're traveling. So we have had in the past where people can't have access to their bank account because their account has been flagged as identity theft because they didn't let their bank know that they were going to be traveling to Guatemala. So just please make sure that you're calling in advance to let them know the dates of your travel. And then also you need to check on your specific bank as far as the various fees. Typically the ATM withdrawals are pretty good because you can get the current rate on whatever the exchange rate is. And unfortunately, sometimes they also charge a fee for those international ATM withdrawals. So it just depends on whichever bank that you are going to be using for your withdrawals. And a lot of the stuff, whether it's like the majority of meals or, you know, it's meant to be something where you're not going to be taking out a lot of money anyways. So this is mainly just for if you do want to do like some early Christmas shopping or whatever the case may be for your family to bring back some stuff, or for your students or whatever. The other thing to consider is that in the past, we have had a lot of people that just bring US cash. You can exchange $200 US cash per week at each bank. And so on the orientation tour that you'll do your first full day in Guatemala, Tiffany, Karen, and Blanca will be taking you by Parque Central and specifically spending some time and pointing out where to go to exchange that money or go to the ATM. But keep in mind also, if you choose this option, safety first, and to be able to use a money belt that you have under your clothes, for example, when you're traveling. And also to be able to keep in mind that the Guatemalan banks will be checking the quality of the bills. They do have some counterfeiting that goes on. And so please make sure that you're getting crisp bills when you get your money that you're going to be bringing there at your bank. And also they typically will prefer 50s and 100s. So we have had some issues in the past with people trying to exchange smaller bills. And part of that, I think, is because they're not as crisp as well. So you do need to pay attention to those type of details as well.
So gifts are not, you don't have to, but it is really fun to bring your homestay family and your Spanish instructor a gift. And what I found is that bringing things that are made in Colorado, where I'm from, or from my hometown, or that have some kind of personal sentiment, are often well received. I brought chocolate. We make chocolate in Colorado. Even though Guatemala is really well known for its chocolate, it's really hard to get good chocolate in the grocery store. It's usually just saved for export. Some other ideas that I've run across and kept a list, like wind chimes, a string of lights, books for your teacher, or even for the family sometimes, but in Spanish, remember. A friend of mine was saying kitchen towels or some kind of item for the kitchen that might be interesting or that has a logo on it. And last year I brought a bunch of games for kids. I brought jacks and pickup sticks and Uno and things like that I thought were really fun for the kids at school, as well as I had a couple of kids in the family that I stayed at. And I was thinking that it would even be fun to play Uno with your host family. I mean, that might be really fun. So I don't know, those kinds of considerations. If you get stuck on what you should bring or what you'd like to bring, then let me know. Karen and I are going to be emailing you out in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks, and we can answer any other questions that you have about that or a brainstorm.
And also to keep in mind that the host family's big emphasis, because they're providing the meals for you, is anything that's related to cooking or related to the kitchen, kind of like Tiffany had said. That's always a good fallback option, where even if they have that already, like because they're cooking so much, they will probably need another one. So that's a good fallback option as well.
Yeah, like specialty foods and stuff like that are really fun. Like someone brought some jam from their hometown, and I don't know, there's some good ideas.
And then we will be talking next orientation session especially, but there will be a materials list that is in the process. Blanca is kind of heading that up to put together what the specific teachers need as far as various like school materials and stuff like that. So that's something that we will have a most likely Google spreadsheet that will have a spot not only for what is already needed that we know is already needed, but what each of you is potentially planning on bringing. Although that is not something that you should feel like you need to do, that you are required to do. That's something also that included in your tuition is an amount of money that will be in the form of like a donate, like where we'll be going out and getting materials to give to your collaborating teacher. So we'll have more information about that as we get closer to especially our second orientation session. A few other frequently asked questions. Time zone, Colorado and Guatemala are in the same time zone, so mountain time. And then just to keep in mind, Antigua actually does have a gym, but common internet access is not something that you should necessarily rely on. your homestay family may end up having internet, but don't count on it. And even if they do, it's one of those things where the router is a lot weaker than the routers that are here in the United States. So it's not like you're going to be able to have this really big Skype or FaceTime conversation using video, especially. If anything, it might be something where you can like do an email check, but the Spanish school will have a little bit more reliable internet access. And there's also some internet kind of like cafes that you can go to for super cheap. And then the homestay living situation, multiple people will be with each family, and that's intentional. That's meant to be as a support. We won't have more than, I believe, I want to say 5 of you with each family. And there won't be a situation where you're going to need to be sharing a room with more than one other roommate. And obviously each person will have their own bed. So we'll also get into some of those details as far as the family living situation. And then keep in mind also that on Sunday, most of you are going to be arriving on Sunday. Typically Sunday is meant to be, and part of this is because of the influence on from Catholicism, but it's meant to be a day of rest by the family. And so therefore meals are not going to be provided on Sundays. The only exception to that is that when you arrive from the United States after your long day of international travel, we have communicated to the families that they will be providing a very light meal, whether that's a sandwich plus some fruit or whatever the case may be. But if you're the type of person that either you would like to eat a little bit more heartily than that, or just in case you want to have a little bit of money available in case you need to, you want to go to a restaurant or something like that when you arrive, please exchange those dollars into quetzales so that you have a little bit of money to do that if you would like when you arrive, because obviously the banks won't be open on Sunday in Guatemala. So if that is something that you would like to do, especially for those people that are arriving a little bit earlier on Sunday, then please do bring some quetzales ahead of time, but don't get a lot of quetzales ahead of time, because typically the exchange rate is not going to be that great, depending. So just keep that in mind.
And Karen and I are also probably going to collect people that want to go out for dinner that Sunday night too, so we can all kind of just get to know each other a little bit better. Meal. So this is the calendar, and I don't want to spend a lot of time with it because it's pretty self-explanatory, but there's a really good combination of school visits, actually doing some cultural activities, and a little bit of free time, which we've taken into consideration based on feedback from our participants. So please keep that in mind as well. If you have any questions about this, what you're viewing now, you can just email, and I can answer it for you at the end.
And when Tiffany says a little bit of free time, keep in mind that it truly is just a little bit of free time. So with something that's, only 2 weeks, we try to be able to make sure that you're able to get the most out of an experience like this. And so we do end up putting quite a few activities into it. However, like she said, there has been some feedback in the past where they would like a little bit more free time. So
for shopping and things like that.
Yeah. So for example, each Friday in the morning, I think is...
Well, except for the first Friday morning, that's Pacaya.
Well, the volcano hike is optional. Okay. So that's something that if you don't sign up for the volcano hike, then that would be a free morning for you. But we really do recommend that you do that volcano hike.
Yes, if you can.
If you can.
Yeah. So one of the schools that some of you will be at is called El Hato. And it's a mountain school, and it caters to kids that are preschool to 6th grade. It's a small, short ride it's actually a very beautiful ride up the side of a mountain to from where we will all be meeting. And it's a school that caters to mostly, I think all of the kids there are Indigenous. And it's a sweet, sweet, sweet school in that it is a little bit removed from everything. There's anywhere from 20 to probably 45 kids per classroom, and it's very, very basic. It'll be a wonderful experience. We've had a great time there in the past, and I can't imagine it'll be any different. The kids will love you.
Yeah, and so that bottom picture you see is the entire school from last year, as well as all the participants from Spanish4Educators that were, last year we actually had it divided up among 2 schools, El Hato as well as a different school, which due to the size of our cohort this year, luckily we're most likely just going to all be going to El Hato. And we are in the process of forging some collaboration with another school that's in a adjacent city to Antigua that's called Ciudad Vieja, which means old city, which actually was a former national capital of Guatemala. And so the city itself is a little bit bigger than Antigua, and it's similar as far as the preschool through 6th grade, a little bit less on the van ride, but that's all dependent on, there's a chance, and Faye, I hope that you're listening. I would love it if the 2 other people from your district would be able to go on the trip, and if they are, then we may be able to, we'll have to play it by ear as far as how we're going to divide that out, but it's going to be a great experience no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So a few things as far as the school shadowing that we want to kind of set the tone with. This is one of those situations where for somebody that is able to speak a little bit better of conversational Spanish, there is a chance that they're going to get a little bit more out of the experience because they'll be able to interact a little bit more. And with that said, there's a lot of, what did they say? Like 75% of your communication is nonverbal.
Yep.
So, so no matter what, it's, we really do feel that you're going to be able to get a lot out of the school shadowing experience. You will be matched with most likely the same teacher for all 4 sessions that we do. And that is very intentional, that we found that if you are able to get into that class, the same classroom each time, then that's a lot more valuable to build those relationships with the students, with your collaborating teacher. And then for the first 1 to 2 sessions, just mimic a student. So if they're taking notes, then you can just take notes too. So a lot of times, especially early on, we had people that are like, well, I didn't know what to do. I was just, and that's totally fine. It sometimes can feel a little bit unnatural when it's not your classroom. Unfortunately for us as teachers, like we have our own classroom. So it's a little bit of an unnatural feeling, but when in doubt, just mimic the student, and whatever they're doing, just do that same thing. So what I usually bring to the shadowing sessions are, a pad of paper, a notebook, maybe whatever my Spanish homework is for the, because you will get Spanish school homework from your Spanish classes, and the same types of materials that the students will have as well. If you're comfortable with it by those last couple of sessions, then there will potentially be an opportunity to be able to co-teach a lesson. So like we did have one year, we had a middle school science teacher who actually was not at a very high fluency level of her Spanish, but she was really passionate about science, and she wanted to be able to take one of those risks that kind of got her into the risk zone and kind of like the growth area on zone of proximal development. And it turned out great. And that's another thing where the facilitator of your site, whether it's just El Hato or whether it's both sites, whether it's Karen, Tiffany, or Blanca, they will be able to help provide support for if you do decide that you want to do something like co-teaching a lesson. And it's something where they would be able to help facilitate a conversation with your collaborating teacher to be able to make sure that that's even okay. Because remember, it's, you know, it really is their classroom when it comes down to it. And so different teachers are going to react differently about something like that.
My teacher, I just helped her with things. I did some duplication of worksheets and things like that. And I helped students. That's what I mostly did, is I just I'd go by the students and just help them out with their, whatever they were working on. I didn't teach a lesson. However, I did help facilitate a lesson last year with an art teacher that we had out that did a really wonderful art lesson with the students. And she was a beginner speaker. She was just super tenacious.
Yeah, and then we had one woman 2 years ago, I think it was, she was actually a PE teacher, but she also like had a side gig as a clown. And so she was a clown, and she brought all of her clown stuff, and she did like the you know, the little balloons that you tie up and that sort of stuff. So if you have something that you can bring in that way, that always just makes the experience so much more rich. So so yeah, keep that in mind as well.
And also know that these schools that are, especially El Hato, Spanish is their second language. Their primary language is the language of their family. So.
And as far as resources go, please keep in mind also that despite the fact that it's called a public school, the government really doesn't provide a lot of funding besides, you know, some of the salaries for the teachers. So unfortunately, like if you see something that you would consider not best practice, then it's not necessarily because of ignorance, I guess. So please be sensitive as far as, you know, like one of the rooms that I've been in, and I have a really great relationship with this teacher, and I think that she's an amazing teacher. And, you know, they have one copy of a textbook, and that's like all of their supplies. And she has 40 kids in her room when we're used to having like 20, you know, between 22 and 30. And so, you know, just keep that kind of in the back of your mind as you're kind of going through the experience and reflecting on it. And then the bottom bullet point there is that if you know, it's best not to be with another Spanish4Educators participant. When that has been the case, we've had it where, you know, sometimes there might be side conversations going on in English and that sort of stuff. So we are intentional to make sure that you are in your own classroom with your own collaborating teacher and your own class of kids. And that is intentional as well. And, you know, that's one reason why we've got the facilitators there to be able to provide support for you. So one of the last things, as far as the reading and viewing list, so I, Rigoberta Menchú, again, that's the one that you either have received or will receive. It's strongly recommended that you do read that book. There's also going to be an opportunity for some reflection and for some kind of quote dropping, as far as we're going to have a spreadsheet or a Google document set up on the shared Google folder that you will be getting access to be able to kind of hopefully stimulate a conversation about some of the things that you're noticing or wondering about with the book. A couple of other reads, you know, I know that time is short in the land of education, but especially coming into our summer, Silence on the Mountain is about an American who travels to Guatemala during the height of the civil conflict and has some experiences in a really, really, really entrenched area with the civil conflict. And then the Bitter Fruit book is more of kind of like a broad look at kind of like the history of what the author calls the American coup in Guatemala because of the influence of the American government. And then some of these documentaries are really great, recommended. When the Mountains Tremble is actually, I believe that it's mainly featuring Rigoberta Menchú, and so it's kind of like a verbal / video account of many of the items that you will be reading about in the book. And so that's probably, if I were to say one out of those, I would say that one, but you might need to go to the library, and sometimes they would make you do like interlibrary loan or something like that for that movie. And then those bottom ones are available on Netflix streaming. So those are more accessible. And La Camioneta is a great one. It profiles a bus that starts in an auction yard in Texas, I believe it is, and it ends up in Guatemala as a public bus. So for many of you, you may or may not know that the public buses in Guatemala are kind of like recycled US school buses. And so that's what that one's about. And then Living on $1 is a great one that features not only Guatemala, but many other developmental countries, developing countries that are, and it kind of goes through what it's like to live on $1 a day. Mm-hmm. So do what you can. The only one that, we would really strongly recommend would be the Rigoberto Menchú book. If you are taking the graduate credits, then I would also recommend the Silence on the Mountain book and the documentaries.
Silence on the Mountain is hard to get through. It's written like a dissertation. So.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and move into a question and answers. And so let me go ahead and switch over to the video where you guys can see us here. And then I will check to see what questions that we have. Okay, there we are. So let's go over to our email here. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions. So I hope that means that everybody's good right now as far as where you're at and you're feeling excited and great and ready to go. And
if anything does come up, then you have our contact information. So we'll be happy to answer questions at any time.
Yeah, and not only that, but orientation session number 2, we'll be getting out the details on that. Typically, it's been around, like 3-ish weeks prior to departure. And so the hope is that a lot of your final questions will be answered on that orientation session number 2. But yeah, we'll be able to kind of go maybe do a little recap of some of the major kind of frequently asked questions that had been asked between then and now during that orientation session number 2. So that'll also be an availability.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we're really excited about the trip, and I'm a little bit jealous of Tiffany and Karen that I'm not going to be able to go this year, but it'll be great. And so yeah, let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.